Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Supreme Decisions Legal Minute Podcast, and I am your host, Supreme Decisions. Today, I want to start off with this. I will love and serve God, my country, and the people. I will uphold the Constitution and obey legal orders of the duly constituted authorities. I will oblige myself to maintain a high standard of morality and professionalism. I will respect the customs and traditions of the police service, and I will live a decent and virtuous life to serve as an example to others. That is the police officer's pledge. Now, many of us wonder, for the most part, what it is, how it is, why it is I say certain things. Here is the image we have of a police officer. Very few of us believe that most police officers love their country, simply because most of the acts that we see on a daily basis is not one of love or virtue. We look at police officers and we see most of them do not live a decent or virtuous life, as we believe those things apply. What we do know is a police officer, 96% of the time, of the people they encounter, is going to be in a bad situation, so they're probably not having a good day. Very seldom does someone see a police officer for a good reason. And even in the context of virtuousness, we look at the numbers, because men lie, women lie, numbers don't. The Department of Justice, most of us can live with those numbers. The FBI, most of us can live with those numbers. Those numbers have police officers at the highest clip of those with mental health issues. They have them at the highest clip for domestic violence. They have them at the highest clip of those that are more prone to using violence. Now, I did a podcast on Officer Kelvin Dingle. Officer Kelvin Dingle spoke about professionalism, restraint, and he also spoke about, because that's what we are trained to do. Remember, that was also the common denominator that fell upon a friend of mine who spoke about quitting, showing uniformity for doing what they were trained to do and being punished for that same thing, which most of us view as not following the Constitution, which means they are not legally following law. Yeah, I'm going to get back to that, because I think that's where the separation is. They're being punished for doing what they're trained to do. They're supposed to be trained to follow the Constitution and the legalities of law. Yet, the disconnect comes because they're doing what they're trained to do, but it's not lawful. I looked at a situation a couple of days ago, which it didn't surprise me, but it was one that actually put a lot of this at the forefront of what I'm going to speak about today. And it's the duty of care and the fiduciary duty that police officers have to the citizens. Yes, because they are public servants. The government is here to serve the people. Understand that. This is not my words. These are things that are in a 5th grade social studies book. Most of us don't even have or understand 5th grade social studies, science, or math. But If I dumb down for my audience, I can. But again, I'll get into that, because if you're not educated, and how Kennedy said back in '68, we're taking funding from our schools in 1968, because if you are not educated, you're easier to control. Jordan V. Prince spoke about police officers not being educated people. They're easier to control. They're being punished for doing what they're trained to do. Officer Dingle thinks it's professionalism. He also spoke about seeing on a daily basis how police officers, who in Joe Biden's police reform bill that was shot down, never required retraining, but offered grenade launchers. The professionalism that was shown by Sergeant Christopher Pealis. And again, if I didn't say his name right, so be it. But what I found interesting in this was Christopher, P-U-L-L-E-A-S-E, so you can actually look it up, was perceived by a female officer to be escalating a situation with a suspect that was in handcuffs. I'm going to say that one more time. Sergeant Christopher Pealis, however you wish to say it, P-U-L-L-E-A-S-E, was appearing to be escalating a situation with a suspect that was in handcuffs. A fellow officer, a subordinate, intervened, basically grabbing him around the waist and walking him away from the suspect. Why? Because there were 4 other officers there. He then turned and at first glance looks to have put his hands around the neck of this female police officer. Where was his professionalism? If you have 4 other officers on the scene, what would be the purpose of escalation unless you're doing what you're training others to do? Her response was because what he was doing was not something that was by the book. What he was doing was not something that will be seen as following the Constitution and its legalities. What he was doing was not living a virtuous life. What he was also doing was opening up a can of worms for every other complaint that he's had against him and those he's trained. Now, why am I talking about that? Because oftentimes I tell you, go back and request the arrest affidavit. Why? Because we know, I believe it's Malloy v. Hogan, police officers don't know what probable cause is. We can safely assume that simply because we know Jordan V. Prince stated that they don't hire anyone with the IQ around 104. We know that Hogan stated they're not qualified to make a probable cause determination. However, they are allowed to lie and manipulate. Those things we know. Now, we also know that they have discretion, but within that discretion, they have two options. One is that of a willful act. The other is that is done through ignorance. And when they're acting outside of either one of those, which is pretty much free will, they're making a conscious choice to either that they're ignorant to what's right, or they understand what's right and they're ignoring it. Now, here's where I'm about to get deeper into this, because when I'm telling you to go ask for these things, we know that they're using stock language, which means they can't give an accurate account of what actually happened. Well, we know that because they're not intelligent enough to articulate themselves. So again, we know that because now we can attack those things. When I told you that we're going to weaponize your defense, we're going to go in with the obvious, the things that we know. Because we also know that the DA, prosecutor, however you want to choose it, cherry picks the cases. Why? Because they are, I was actually going to use this as a title, but I'm not going to use that today. It's the declaration of war. They understand they're choosing battles that they can win. I'm going to say that again. They're choosing battles that they can win. It goes back to the bully scenario. If I'm bullying 100 people and only 5 of them are fighting back, I'm going to keep doing it. But if it starts to get to 10 to 15, now I got to think about how I'm bullying, and then I'm going to be more selective of my bullying, or I'm going to change my tactics. So we now had 2020. We had a refresher course on tactics. The tactics are similar, but they have slight differences. But understand, I'm still talking about the first part of this. The professionalism. The oath of the police officer. The constitutional structure in which they are given to follow. The prosecutor's declaration of war. Many of us don't understand the art of war and the art of the actual contact, the battle, the commencement ceremony is the act of standing up. And you know what's funny? Because even understanding this is an adversarial system, we know more about our adversary than we do ourselves. Still yet, we create something that builds our adversary up so high to which we choose not to even fight. Not because we can't win, but it's because the expectation is that we are afraid to lose. I'm going to say that not because we can't win, but it's because we are afraid to lose. And a man that will give up freedom for comfort deserves neither. Understand that if you will not sacrifice for anything, you will fall for everything. Sometimes these are not just slogans. These are not just colloquialisms that you can just throw out. These are things that are actual set in stone. Because I always tell people, you negotiate once, you'll negotiate twice. And the greatest thing I've understood is when I was doing this for free, I found out who really wanted it. I found out who really believed it. Because it wasn't the people that was actually getting it for free. because I'm still on the other side of so many I was going to. Man, when this happened, I'm going to do this for you, brother. And then I was actually sold out by someone I actually saved their life. Literally. I actually posted today something that I put up 4 years ago, and it was actually funny to me. And it said simply, sacrifice comes before success, even in the dictionary. Most people want something instantly. They think every part of this is winnable. The Art of War. I was going to drop so many Art of War sayings, but the Art of War said something that was very intriguing. It's the understanding of the battle itself. But it also talked about having a focused fight. It's beginning with the end in mind. I've asked the question, what are you willing to lose? How much justice are you looking for? What is your level of justice? Because all these questions are relevant. Because you're not going to win every battle. Because every time you stand up, you also have to understand the face. The face that said it was okay to have a 14-year-old go without food and water for 17 hours. But that same system say it was okay for a police officer to go into the wrong house because she was tired and murder someone. I'm going to say that one more time. They held a 14-year-old at a higher standard than they did a 31-year-old woman that was a police officer. But yet, in the police officer's oath, police officers speak about walking with a higher standard, understanding that duty is greater than themselves, yet they don't want to be held accountable for it. This is where it happens with Christopher. Sergeant Christopher, he is a supervisor. He is a head. He is a person that is leading. He is a person that is teaching, yet a man that is in handcuffs, officer with multiple hands, an officer that is trained in hand-to-hand combat, an officer that is supposed to be showing dignity and professionalism, was escalating a situation. Still yet, he chose to attack the person that was looking to help him not escalate and get in trouble. But here's the even funnier part about that whole situation. I found it funny that when someone was suspected of killing a police officer, within hours, we knew their name, we knew their work history, we knew who they were in relationships with, we knew what town they had lived in, we also knew how many times they had been arrested. "5 days in, we're just learning Christopher's actual name. But he's the one that's at a higher standard than the actual criminal. Why is that? Why do we know more about criminals than we do those that are in higher places? Why do we have more access to criminals than we do those that are in higher places? Does understand that? And understand higher in this case doesn't mean that they are above you, because they are still servants to you. Higher meaning I'm gonna give you a great one, because me, I grew up on the Fresh Prince. I grew up on Richie Rich. I grew up on these people. Hell, Batman, Jarvis. I grew up on the Jetsons. I looked at those that were the maids, the butlers, the quote-unquote servants. Their standard was excellence, because their first duty was for the benefit of those that they were serving. Their first duty was for those that they are serving. I'm going to actually give you a greater example. I fly often. I haven't flown in probably about 8-10 months. But I was flying, and one of the things that was surprising to me was the simple fact that I didn't know if a plane was going down, and you're traveling with a child. The first person that's supposed to get an oxygen mask is the adult. To me, I was like, oh, well, maybe I want my baby to get this oxygen mask. But then it strikes me as why. In order for me to be an aid to my child is actually learning from me how to survive, how to be a leader, how to do the things right. Because a child learns by mimicking. In order for me to be a help to my child, I must first put myself in a position to help. Because if I'm passed out on the floor and the child sees I don't have on an oxygen mask, guess what that child is not going to do? If I haven't put it on them, they're not going to put one on. If I have put one on them, they're going to remove it. Why? Because I didn't show them how important that oxygen mask was. Now, the reason why I brought that up was because I had that conversation, and it was surprising because, again, most people think, let me put this on the child. The problem is we haven't taught that child how to survive. Christopher, he's teaching his subordinates, because that's what was out there. He was the highest ranking officer. He was a training officer. He is an officer that they are looking at. He didn't teach them how to de-escalate a situation. He was training these people, whether he understood it or not, to escalate a situation. He was training these people to berate, belittle, and abuse. You know, the things that are not professional. The things that are not living with dignity. The things that are not, that Officer Dingle talked about, should be. Christopher was actually showing why Officer Dingle is not being smiled at. Christopher was also showing why no one speaks to Officer Dingle. Christopher was also showing why no one is happy to see Officer Dingle. Because the one thing that my boy told me, and it was heartbreaking, he said a bad cop is a good cop's worst nightmare. The reason why Officer Dingle brought up all these videos that he sees on a daily basis is because we don't see good policing. We don't see the dignified policing. And when we do, it seems staged. Now, if you ask me about two good police officers, I know that I couldn't tell you their names off top, but I know I watch them on YouTube. But when we're talking about a nation of at least 1 million police officers, and I can only name two, that's a problem. I've only seen two, that's a problem. When I can only have a conversation about two, that's a problem. When we're constantly having police unions rehire people like, you know what, because I actually told you last week I was doing some binge watching, and I actually sat down again and watched The People versus O.J. Simpson. I actually wanted to see what it was, how it was, but I actually found it interesting. We watched 8 police officers on video beat the absolute tar out of Rodney King and get acquitted. Made me come up with Belly, crimes with no real punishment. Then it brought up Mark Fuhrman. Mark Fuhrman, which I actually had to go and look up to verify because I thought it was the most hilarious thing in the world, is because he actually sued the LA Police Department. The department he was a part of. The department he had been the department in which he had been accused of multiple times by not only other police officers, but citizens of being racist, doing racist things. He actually sued for the inability to do things that are that's gone beyond his quote unquote written duties. And yet they wonder why he was a horrible witness. Because again, remember the podcast I talked about police character on trial? How about the judge? The judge went out, referred to a young man as an N-word, then referred to him as a roach. What I thought was actually, like just unbelievably profound was the simple fact that immediately she went on vacation out of the country after this happened. Then it comes to find out that she had lied about, because most of the time you throw the N-word around so many times, you don't even remember. It's so loose, you don't even understand that you're using it. But then come to find out, not only did she lie about that night, she couldn't even remember what night it was. She then said, oh yeah, I had already booked this, and I'm going out the country. Her husband then had some things that fell back on him, and then her son was kicked off of LSU's track team. And so the trickle-down effect happened. She then resigned in hopes to keep her pension. Well, here's the problem now. All of her cases, not only as a judge, but her as a prosecutor, are now being reopened. Because of her character. Because of her trust of police. Because of her non-dignified life. But the reason why I even brought that part of it up is because, again, her as a prosecutor, she's a public servant. Her as a judge is a public servant. Her duty is to the public, not to herself. Her duty as a judge is to be neutral, not racially biased. Here's the question I got to ask for you, because I thought it was rather humorous. It's one of those things that it'll sit down and make you think. And the reason why it makes you think is because you have to open your eyes to it a little bit. The question is, what if both sides believe the lie? Now, let me clear that up a little bit for you. What if the accused honestly believe that they are innocent? What if the accuser honestly believes the story that they're giving about the accused is true and that they are guilty? What if both stories are true? Then what? Here's where I have to kind of give you a separation on that. Because now it boils down to evidence. It boils down to this thing called standing. This is the part of the declaration of war I was getting ready to get into. You have to be able to stand on what it is that you're saying. Now, I'm not much of a poker player, but I definitely do understand whenever I'm playing poker, I don't let everybody know what's in my hand. Because anything I say can be used against me. Saying this because a lot of times people offer up an alibi. Nobody cares about your alibi. Nobody cares about the story of the defense. Until. No one cares about how you feel about something. The separation, and if both sides are believing the lie, is evidence. Here's why you don't trust the quote-unquote uneducated police officers, or the limited educated police officers, or the limited intelligent police officers, whatever you want to spin on it, because again, they're doing what they're trained to do. You understand the law. The accused has to stand on the story that the accused gives. The accused is the only one that has to prove what they're saying is true. Because the defense does not have to participate in the progress of it. The defense has the right to remain silent. The defense has the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. The defense doesn't have a story that they need to stand on. But in order to take away or to prepare a defense for that standing, it's dependent on the initial encounter of those that have pledged an oath, a fiduciary duty love their country, protect the Constitution, serve the public. In order to protect the Constitution, you have to follow law. Most of them don't know law. We know this. But we also understand that there are steps in which they have to follow. One is filing these reports. Because the one thing that most of these police officers hate is paperwork. But within that paperwork, we understand they're using stock language. Stock language cannot give you exacts. It offers vagueness. We can challenge the vagueness of each situation. We can challenge the affidavits that they have because they can't argue with themselves. We can challenge the warrants that they get, search and arrest. We can have map hearings. We can have frank hearings. We can even challenge identifications because we do know, because again, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. FBI database, Department of Justice database, cross-race references or identifications are wrong 84% of the time. Dog sniffs are wrong 73% of the times. Why? Because, again, the trigger itself only offers probable cause for the warrant. It doesn't then allow them to just start wrecking stuff. Because last time I checked, unless you are a dog trainer, you're probably not going to know what those triggers are. And there's a good chance that those that are handling the dog don't know what those triggers are. And they're just saying something. Because, again, These are not honest people. They're not trained to be honest. They're trained to guess and hope. I put up a video several times that actually mirrored, or that actually showed Amanda Ruffin's propaganda. It has been taken down multiple times on multiple platforms simply because the understanding of the programming will change your perspective, because you got to remember there is no spoon. And when you do realize that there is no spoon, you'll then understand it's not the spoon that bends, because that's impossible. It's your mind. I'm working on reprogramming your mind. I'm taking you to another place. When you're digging in, you're understanding what I'm giving you. It then becomes something different. As it becomes different, you begin to see the world differently. Give you another story. If you actually follow me on Facebook or whatever, you heard about a young man. He was Ricky Hayes. He was the 16-year-old, Ricardo Hayes, excuse me. I kept talking about the fact that the newspaper referred to him as an autistic man. Yet, he was a 16-year-old teenager that Officer Muhammad called over to his car and then shot multiple times. Hayes lived. Muhammad didn't realize that the person's house he shot this autistic boy in front of have a vivid, how would you say that? Vivid, I guess that's how it is, home security system that had excellent cameras and excellent audio. So again, this is not a commercial for Vivid, but if you don't have a security system, Vivid is the one you should have. Now, again, it also just a side note, if your ass is riding around without a dash camera, it's your own fault whatever happens to you. But back to the story. Officer Muhammad didn't realize that this was happening, so when the police were doing the investigation, it was found that this video existed. It was not left out. Officer Muhammad then threatened the life of a fellow police officer for not hiding the video. Because I'm pretty sure y'all remember Eddie Johnson spoke about allowing the cover-ups, allowing the no snitching, allowing the blue wall. I'm gonna give you one more. I gave you guys a couple years ago a conversation I had. I want to say it was one of the original podcasts. A friend of mine who was a police officer, we were having a conversation as he was giving me a ride home. And part of the conversation shifted to correcting a fellow police officer. He kind of looked away, and I asked him, do I truly love my brother if I cannot correct his behavior, or if I cannot reprimand him? And he just looked at me. When you have, I will oblige myself to maintain a high standard of morality and professionalism. I will respect the customs and traditions of police service. if that's something that you believe, why would you then hurt someone that's attempting to help you? But at the second part of that, why would you do something that's detrimental to the people that you are supposedly protecting? Sometimes these questions aren't just for thought. This is a little something for you to feed on. This is something you to live by. Because whether we like it or not, whether the prosecutors like it or not, these are the people that we depend on. The public depends on them for safety from actual lawbreakers. The prosecutor depends on them for evidence for actual lawbreakers. The problem is when they're not trained on what law is or how to properly, professionally deal with those that are not breaking the actual law. When there is no one withstanding. When they haven't done the work properly. When they're just looking for a shortcut. When they're not living with the dignity and morality of policing service. That's what people have a problem with. When you cannot reprimand your brother and correct them. That's where the problem is. When we're not able to see people doing the job properly, that's the problem. The acceptance is not fighting back, knowing that's the problem. The acceptance of not getting the affidavits, not requesting the affidavits, not requesting every step of the fight back. Not looking to end the war because you spare the rod, you spoil the child. These children are spoiled. And if you're part of the microwave society thinking that, oh, I'll just do it and it'll be quick, you are fooling yourselves. Civil War wasn't quick. Vietnam wasn't quick. Nagasaki and Hiroshima wasn't quick. Because you ask these people that were in the effects of it, they're still feeling it today. Pearl Harbor wasn't quick. Wars are generally not quick. And there will be casualties. There will be loss. There will be suffrage. There will be sacrifice. If you're choosing not to sacrifice one thing, you're giving up everything. Because understand, in any war, everybody's not meant to be with you. And everybody with you isn't meant to stay.